The blood in my drinking water was still fresh when I found her. 3 drops. Dark red against the morning light filtering down through 20 feet of stone and timber. I was just drawing water for coffee when I saw them swirling in my bucket like some kind of terrible prophecy. That's when I heard the whisper echoing up from the bottom of the well. Morrison, you came back. I grabbed my rope and lantern and went down into that well faster than common sense should have allowed. What I found at the bottom changed everything I thought I knew about my family, my father, and the 30-year-old secret that was about to get me killed. She couldn't have been more than 19. Apache by the intricate beadwork on her torn dress. A gash across her forehead was bleeding freely, and her left shoulder looked wrong. Dislocated or broken, I couldn't tell which. But what stopped my heart cold was the way she looked at me when my lantern light hit her face. Pure, absolute terror. Not the terror of someone who'd fallen into a well and thought they might die. The terror of someone who recognized exactly who I was and knew what that meant for both of us. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the echo of dripping water. They told me you were dead. Who told you I was dead? Lady, I don't even know who you are. She tried to sit up, winced at the pain in her shoulder and stared at me like she was looking at a ghost. You are James Morrison's son. Lieutenant James Morrison, cavalry unit stationed at Fort Apache 1863 to 1865. My blood went cold. Nobody in town knew my father had been in the cavalry. He'd told everyone he'd been a civilian scout, came west after the war looking for ranch land. I'd found his uniform hidden in our barn after he died, but I'd never told a soul about it. How do you know that? Instead of answering, she reached into her dress and pulled out something that made my hands shake. A small leather pouch, old and worn, tied with sinew that had been darkened by years of handling. My grandmother gave me this before she died, told me to find James Morrison's son when I came of age, told me to show him what his father left behind. She opened the pouch and spilled the contents into her palm. 3 military buttons, tarnished brass with US stamped across the front, and underneath them something that made my stomach lurch. Teeth. Small teeth. Children's teeth. What the hell is this? Proof, she said, meeting my eyes. Proof of what your father did to my family 30 years ago. I got her out of that well, but not because I believed her story. I got her out because leaving someone to die at the bottom of my well seemed like the kind of thing that would bring bad luck, and I'd had enough bad luck to last several lifetimes. I carried her to my cabin, set her shoulder as best I could, and bandaged her head wound with strips torn from my cleanest shirt. She never told me her name, never explained how she'd ended up in my well, just sat at my kitchen table clutching that leather pouch and staring at me like I was something dangerous that hadn't struck yet. Your name, I said finally. What's your name? Aiyana. Well, Aiyana, I don't know what game you're playing, but my father never hurt any Apache children. He was a good man who died peacefully in his bed. She laughed, but there was no humor in it, just bitterness that seemed too old and deep for someone so young. Your father died 30 years ago in Canyon del Muerto. What you buried was just his body going through the motions of living. You're talking nonsense. Am I? She stood up, favoring her injured shoulder, and walked to the window that looked out over my ranch. Tell me, John Morrison, why did your father wake up screaming numbers every night? Why did he never attend church services? Why did he hide his uniform in the barn instead of displaying it with pride? I felt the floor tilt under my feet. Nobody knew about my father's nightmares. Nobody knew about his refusal to step foot in a church, or about the uniform I'd found wrapped in oilcloth and buried under a pile of hay. How do you know all that? Because my people have been watching your family for 30 years, waiting, planning, making sure we knew everything about James Morrison and his son before we came to collect the debt he owed.
What? Debt?
Aiyana returned to the table and opened the leather pouch again, this time pulling out something I hadn't noticed before. A piece of paper, yellowed with age, covered in handwriting I recognized. My father's handwriting. Read it, she said. I picked up the paper with hands that shook despite my efforts to steady them. The ink had faded, but the words were still legible. Canyon del Muerto, December 15, 1864. Final casualty count, 247 Apache, including 63 children under the age of 12.
Shit.
Mission accomplished as ordered. Recommend commendation for all personnel involved. Lieutenant James Morrison, 3rd Cavalry. The paper fell from my hands like it was on fire. That's not possible. My father wouldn't. He wasn't. Your father was the commanding officer of the unit that massacred my great-grandmother's clan, Aiyana said quietly. 247 people, John Morrison, men, women, children, babies still nursing at their mother's breasts, all of them killed on your father's orders.
Shit.
Even if that's true, what does it have to do with me?
Shit.
Walked back to the window, and I saw her stiffen. Because they're here.
Who's here? Shit.
My brother's war party. 12 of the finest Apache warriors ever trained, and they've been tracking me for 6 days. They know I found you. I looked out the window and saw them. They emerged from the tree line like shadows given form, painted for war, armed with rifles and traditional weapons. They formed a perfect circle around my cabin, close enough that I could see the individual feathers in their hair. What do they want? Justice, Aiyana said. Apache law says that when someone commits a crime against the people, their entire bloodline must answer for it. Your father killed 247 of my people. Now you pay the price. That's insane. I wasn't even born when that happened. Doesn't matter. Blood debt passes from father to son until it's satisfied. One of the warriors outside called out something in Apache. Aiyana responded in the same language, then turned to me with an expression I couldn't read. My brother Nanish says you have 1 hour to prepare yourself. Prepare for what? To die. But as the words left her mouth, something changed in her face. The hard certainty cracked. Just for a moment, and I saw something else underneath. Doubt, conflict, maybe even regret. Unless, she said quietly. Unless what? There is another way, an old way. From before the white men came to our lands. If someone from the guilty family willingly takes on the suffering they caused, if they prove their commitment through trial and sacrifice, the debt can be transformed.
What kind of trial?
She looked out at her brother's warriors, then back at me. You would have to survive 3 days in Canyon del Muerto, alone. No food, no water, no weapons, just you and the spirits of everyone your father killed. And if I survive, then instead of your enemy, you become our guardian, bound by sacred law to protect my people with your life. For how long? Until you die, or until 7 generations have passed and the debt is fully transformed. I thought about the alternative, death, right here, right now, probably slow and painful if the way they were armed was any indication, versus a chance, however small, of survival, and a life spent in service to people I didn't know. What happens if I say yes but die in the canyon? Then the debt dies with you. Your bloodline is considered clean. I looked out at the warriors surrounding my cabin, then at Aiyana's face. In her dark eyes I saw something that surprised me. She didn't want me to die. Whatever loyalty she felt to her brother's mission, whatever anger she carried about my father's crimes, she'd grown to see me as something other than just the son of a murderer. I'll do it. The journey to Canyon del Muerto took most of the day. Nanish led the way, followed by his warriors with Aiyana and me bringing up the rear. Nobody spoke during the ride, but I could feel the weight of their attention like a physical thing. As we climbed into the high desert, Aiyana began to tell me what the trial would involve. The canyon holds the spirits of everyone who died there, not just my people, but others too. Navajo, Ute, even some of the Spanish explorers who came through in earlier times. It's a place where the dead gather. What do they want? To be heard, to be acknowledged, to have their deaths mean something other than just numbers in a cavalry report. And if they don't like what I have to say? She was quiet for a long moment. Then you join them. We reached the canyon just as the sun was setting. Even from a distance I could feel something wrong about the place. The air seemed heavier, charged with old grief and anger. Our horses refused to go any closer, forcing us to walk the last quarter-mile. Canyon del Muerto opened before us like a wound in the earth. The walls rose hundreds of feet on either side, red rock striped with layers of time. At the bottom, a stream ran clear and cold, and there were caves carved into the rock faces, dozens of them, ranging from small alcoves to caverns, large enough to hold hundreds of people. This is where it happened, Aiyana said. December 15, 1864. Your father's men surrounded the canyon at dawn and waited for everyone to come out of the caves. And when they didn't, your father ordered fires built at the mouth of every cave. Green wood, wet brush, anything that would make thick smoke. Then they waited for everyone inside to suffocate. I could picture it. The panic, the desperate attempts to find clean air, the slow realization that there was no escape, parents trying to shield their children from the smoke, elders using their last breaths to pray for their families. How many survived? 7. All children, hidden in the deepest part of the main cave where the smoke couldn't reach them. My great-grandmother was one of them. She was 8 years old. Nausnish approached us, carrying a bundle wrapped in deer hide. When he unwrapped it, I saw objects that looked both sacred and terrible: carved bone implements, clay pots, bundles of dried plants. "You will drink this," he said, handing me a clay cup filled with water that tasted of minerals and something bitter. "It will help open your spirit to receive what the dead have to show you." The water made my tongue tingle and left an aftertaste like copper pennies. Within minutes I felt disconnected from my body, as if I was observing everything from a slight distance. "Now you enter the sacred cave," Nausnish said, pointing to the largest opening in the canyon wall. "You will remain there for 3 days and nights. No food, no additional water, no light except what the spirits provide. If you emerge alive and changed, the dead is transformed. If not, at least it ends with me," I finished. The cave entrance was wide and tall, but as I went deeper it narrowed into tunnels and chambers that extended far back into the mountain. The air was cool and damp, and my footsteps echoed strangely in the confined space. About 50 feet from the entrance I found a chamber where someone had built a small fire. In the flickering light I could see symbols painted on the walls: handprints, animal figures, abstract designs that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. And I began to see the dead. At first they were just shadows, shapes that suggested people without quite being there. But as the sacred water worked through my system, they became clearer, more defined. I saw them as they had been in life: mothers holding babies, old men leaning on walking sticks, children playing with carved wooden toys, warriors in their prime, reduced to defending families instead of fighting enemies. But I also saw them as they had died, choking on smoke, gasping for air that wasn't there, using their last moments to comfort loved ones, to sing death songs, to curse the men who had trapped them. "Do you see us?" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, spoken in English, but somehow carrying the cadence of Apache. "I see you. Do you know what your father took from us?" I looked around the chamber, seeing not just the 63 children my father's report had mentioned, but all of them. Grandparents who would never tell another story, parents who would never see their children grow up, young people who would never have the chance to start families of their own. "He took your futures," I said. "All of them. Everything you might have been, everything you might have done. And what will you give us in return?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I thought about everything Aiyana had told me about the transformation ritual, about becoming a guardian instead of an enemy. But sitting there in that cave, surrounded by the spirits of the dead, I realized it wasn't enough just to agree to protect her people. I had to understand what protection really meant. "I'll give you my future," I said. "All of it. Every choice I might have made for myself. Every path I might have taken. I'll use my life to make sure what happened here never happens again." The spirits moved closer, and I felt them examining me, testing my resolve, measuring the truth of my words against the weight of their own suffering. "Your father stood in this cave once," they told me, "after the smoke cleared and he came to count the bodies. He saw what we show you now: the children who died clutching their mothers, the elders who used their last breath to sing, the babies who never had a chance to cry." "What did he do?" "He wept. Then he wrote his report, collected his commendation, and spent the rest of his life trying to forget what he had seen. But he couldn't forget. No, the dead do not forget, and they do not let others forget. We followed him home, whispered to him in the dark, showed him our faces in every reflection. We drove him mad with remembering. I understood now why my father had woken up screaming numbers, why he'd hidden his uniform and refused to enter churches. The dead had been with him every day for 30 years, making sure he never escaped what he'd done. "Is that what you want from me?" "Madness, a lifetime of guilt and nightmares." "No," the spirit said. and their voices began to harmonize, creating something that was almost like music. We want something your father never gave us. We want justice. How? Make our deaths mean something. Use your life to build bridges instead of burning them. Become the protector your father should have been. On the second night, the visions changed. Instead of showing me the past, the spirits began to show me possible futures. I saw myself living among Aiyana's people, learning their language and customs, helping to negotiate peaceful relationships with white settlers. I saw children as Apache and white playing together without fear or hatred. But I also saw other possibilities, futures where I failed in my duties, where old prejudices and misunderstandings led to more violence, futures where my good intentions weren't enough to overcome generations of mistrust and pain. The path you choose matters, the spirits warned me. What intentions alone will not transform a blood debt. You must be willing to sacrifice everything you were to become everything we need you to be. I understand. Do you? Your people will call you traitor. They will say you've been corrupted by Apache magic, turned against your own kind. You will belong fully to neither world, accepted completely by neither side. I thought about that, about the life I'd lived so far, quiet, solitary, focused mainly on working my ranch and staying out of other people's business. It hadn't been a bad life, but it hadn't been particularly meaningful either. Maybe that's exactly what both sides need, I said. Someone who belongs to neither world completely, so he can help build bridges between them. On the third night, something fundamental changed. The spirits stopped showing me visions and started speaking to me directly, their voices blending together until they became a single presence that filled the entire cave. John Morrison, they said, son of James Morrison. Do you willingly accept the transformation of your father's blood debt? I do. Do you willingly bind yourself to the protection of the Apache people, to stand as guardian and bridge builder until your death or the completion of 7 generations? I do. Then receive the mark of transformation. I felt something change inside me, not physical exactly but fundamental, like a door opening in my mind, or a new sense awakening. Suddenly I could understand the Apache voices I heard echoing through the cave. I could feel the presence of Aiyana and her brother outside, waiting to see if I would emerge alive, and I could sense something else. A network of connections stretching across the land, linking every Apache family to every other, creating a web of relationships and obligations that I was now part of. When I walked out of that cave on the 4th morning, Nalnish took one look at my face and nodded. It is done, he said. The debt is transformed. Aiyana approached me cautiously, studying my eyes. How do you feel? Different, I said, and it was true. I felt like the same person, but also like someone entirely new, like I was looking at the world through different eyes, seeing connections and possibilities I'd never noticed before. The spirits accepted you, she said. It wasn't a question. They did more than that. They adopted me. We returned to my ranch, but everything had changed. Not the physical buildings or the landscape, but the meaning of it all. This wasn't just my land anymore. It was a place where 2 worlds could meet, where Apache and white could find common ground. Over the following weeks, Aiyana taught me about her people's customs, their history, their current struggles. I learned that her clan was one of several that had been displaced by the expanding settlements, pushed onto marginal land that couldn't support them properly. We need what your people have, she explained, as we sat by my fire one evening. Not just the land but the knowledge, how to work with traders, how to navigate the legal system, how to protect ourselves from those who would take advantage. And what can your people offer in return? She smiled. Knowledge your people desperately need but don't realize they're missing. How to live in harmony with the land instead of fighting against it. How to build communities based on mutual support rather than individual competition. How to raise children who understand their place in the larger web of life. It was a compelling vision, but I also knew how difficult it would be to achieve. The people in town won't accept this easily, I said. They're afraid of Apache, and fear makes people dangerous. Fear comes from not understanding. We must give them chances to understand. How? Slowly, carefully, by proving that cooperation benefits everyone. She was right, but it would take time, years probably, maybe a generation or more. Are you willing to wait that long? I asked. I've already waited my entire life for the chance to transform my family's pain into something constructive, she said. I can wait longer if necessary. That's when I realized something had been growing between us during these weeks of working together, learning from each other, planning for a future neither of us could build alone, something that went beyond duty or obligation, or the sacred bonds that had brought us together. Aiyana, I said carefully, what happens between us now? Personally, I mean, not as guardian and protected but as whatever we might choose to be. She looked into the fire considering her words. Apache custom requires a guardian to be fully committed to his duty. No divided loyalties, no competing obligations. My heart sank. Which means, she continued, meeting my eyes with a smile that made my chest tight, that if a guardian chooses to marry within the people he protects, that marriage strengthens rather than divides his loyalties. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that the spirits didn't just transform your father's debt, John Morrison. They created the possibility for something completely new, a union between two worlds, built on understanding instead of conquest. I reached across the space between us and took her hand, her fingers intertwined with mine like they'd been made to fit together. Then let's build something new, I said. 6 months later our wedding took place on the land that had once been just my ranch but had become something larger, a meeting ground, a place where Apache and white settlers could trade, negotiate, learn from each other. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still misunderstandings, still people on both sides who preferred the old ways of suspicion and conflict. But it was a beginning, and sometimes when I looked across the valley at the smoke rising from Apache camps mixed with smoke from white homesteads, when I watched children playing together who spoke both languages and understood both cultures, I felt the spirits of Canyon del Muerto settle into quiet satisfaction. The blood debt had been more than paid. It had been transformed into something that honored both the dead and the living, a bridge between worlds that would stand long after Aiyana and I were gone. My father's legacy of death had become our legacy of life, and that I thought was justice.